All right, let's talk about something that's been around for decades. A really persistent and honestly scary claim. The idea that there's a link between vaccines and autism. It's caused so much confusion. So, what's the real story here? What does the science actually say? Let's dig in and separate the facts from the fiction. Okay, so let's just cut right to the chase. The big question, the one that's been on so many parents' minds for so long, is this: do vaccines cause autism? It's a heavy question, right? And it deserves a straight, fact-based answer. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. Some have called this one of the most dangerous myths in medicine. That's a really powerful statement, and we're about to see exactly why it's earned that title. But to really get it, to understand why this myth is so damaging, we have to go back, way back to the very beginning, to where this whole thing started. Right, the myth's origin story. So where did this thing even come from? How did such a powerful idea take root? Let's trace it back. Believe it or not, this entire massive myth, it all comes down to one single paper from back in 1998. It was a tiny study, but wow, its conclusion was like a bombshell. But here's what you really need to know. What happened next? Just a few years later, in 2004, most of the people who helped write it were like, wait, no, we take back our support. Then, the big one. In 2010, the journal that published it completely retracted it. They called it an elaborate fraud. And the main author? He ended up losing his medical license. So we're not talking about a simple mistake here. The entire foundation of this myth, it was built on a lie. Okay, so that's the origin story. One bad, fraudulent paper. But what about everything else? What has the rest of the scientific world discovered since then? Let's get into the actual evidence. And this slide right here, this puts it all into perspective. It's just night and day. On one side, you have the myth, which is based on one retracted study with only 12 kids. 12. And on the other side, you have the scientific reality. We're talking dozens and dozens of studies with hundreds of thousands of children. The difference in the sheer weight of evidence is it's staggering. It's not even a fair fight. And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, look at this number, 650,000. That's how many children were in just one of these studies, a single study from Denmark in 2019. And what did they find? The exact same thing everyone else found. No link. Zero association between the MMR vaccine and autism. Absolutely none. So here's the bottom line. After all of this research, we're talking decades of work in countries all over the world with millions of kids, the scientific consensus is completely clear. It's not ambiguous. It's not a debate. Vaccines do not cause autism. Period. The case is closed. Okay, so if it's not vaccines, you're probably wondering, well, what is the cause then? That's the natural next question, right? So let's take a look at what science is actually finding. So first, a quick definition. What exactly is autism spectrum disorder? Well, it's what's called a neurodevelopmental condition. That's just a fancy way of saying it has to do with the brain, that's the neuro part, and how it develops, the developmental part. And the key thing here is that this process of brain development and how connections are formed, it starts way, way before a child ever gets their first vaccine. So the real research, the actual science, is focused on a really complex mix of things. But two big factors keep coming up: genetics and what happens during early brain development, even before birth. It's a combination of things that happens way before the childhood vaccine schedule even begins. But why is this so important? Why does it matter so much to get this right? Well, because this isn't just some abstract scientific debate. This misinformation has had real and sometimes devastating consequences out in the real world. It's a really simple and honestly tragic chain reaction. It all starts with the myth. That creates fear, and that fear causes vaccination rates to drop. And when that happens, the final step is almost inevitable. Diseases we thought we'd beaten, they start to make a comeback. And this isn't some what-if scenario. It's happening right now. We're seeing outbreaks of measles, which can be a really dangerous disease, popping up in communities where vaccination rates have fallen. Even polio, a disease the world was this close to wiping out completely, has reappeared in some areas. These are the very real stakes we're talking about. All right, so let's wrap this up. We've looked at the fraudulent start of this myth. We've seen the mountain of scientific evidence against it. So what's the big takeaway? It's really simple, but it's also incredibly profound. Science saves lives. The evidence couldn't be clearer. Vaccines are safe. They are incredibly effective. They're honestly one of the greatest public health tools we've ever created. And they don't just protect you, they protect the entire community. They protect the little babies who are too young for their shots, and they protect people who can't get vaccinated for medical reasons. So, in the end, it really comes down to a choice. When we have to make these really important decisions about our health, what do we listen to? Do we listen to the fear that's based on a myth that was proven to be a fraud? Or do we listen to decades of overwhelming scientific evidence? So I'll leave you with this question to think about. When it's about protecting ourselves, our families, and our communities, what should be our guide? A single fraudulent study that fell apart years ago, or the combined knowledge of pretty much every major scientific and medical group in the world? The evidence really does make the choice pretty clear. Thanks for joining me.